Myths around health and safety are everywhere. Children wearing goggles when playing conkers, banning hanging baskets because of head injuries, trapeze artists wearing hard hats. Misinformation is everywhere when it comes to health and safety. In the main, these things are harmless. However, in some cases, taking these myths as fact can lead to accidents and breaches of health and safety law. And one section of health and safety that is particularly riddled with these myths is the humble risk assessment. So today, I'm aiming to bust 5 of the most common mistakes and myths that lead to shabby and dangerous risk assessments. Myth number 1. When my risk assessments are done, all the risks need to be low. No matter what measures we put in place, we cannot totally eliminate the risk from every hazard in every task we do. We can lower the risk through applying control measures, and for most hazards we can look to reduce the risk to a level that is low, but this doesn't mean there is no chance of incident. Some hazards, however, such as work at height, will always have a high level of severity if a fall was to occur, meaning that even if we reduce the likelihood of an incident to 1, we would still have a severity rating of 4 or 5, meaning the risk will remain in the medium banding. Making all hazards low risk when evaluating risk is not only incorrect, it's actually a little irresponsible. If you are saying for your risk assessment that a major hazard like work at height or plant movement are low risk activities after you've applied control measures, it could lead workers to have a false sense of security. Complacency around hazards is a major cause of human error, so we need to make sure we don't inspire this through the information we give to our teams. So having hazards labelled as medium risk after control measures allows us to focus on monitoring efforts and make operatives more aware that the hazard poses a higher risk, reducing the chance of complacency. Myth number 2. PPE is an effective control measure and will substantially lower the risk. A very common issue the team at iSafe see with risk assessments is that the author goes straight to PPE as a control measure. However, PPE should be seen as the last line of defence, and we need to consider much more effective control measures before we jump to PPE. Listen, I'm not knocking PPE, sometimes PPE is the only option for keeping us safe. However, in the vast majority of cases, there are much better control measures available before we look at PPE. Before you look at PPE, you should consider ways to eliminate the hazard, substituting the hazard with something that poses a lower risk, putting physical barriers between people and the hazard, administrative controls such as policies, documentation, training and site rules, then consider PPE in addition to these measures. To bring this point home, would you rather be wearing a bulletproof vest in a shootout, which may stop a bullet if it hits you in a particular spot, or would you rather be in a tank where the bullets can't hit you, or better yet, nowhere near the shootout, or better still, get rid of the shootout altogether? If you're in a position where there's no other option available, the vest is great, but there are plenty of better ways to protect yourself from the hazard of being shot. Myth number 3, you can never lower the severity on a risk assessment. This is a common myth, and although it's much easier to reduce likelihood, you can definitely reduce severity on your assessment. If I go to the swimming pool and do a cheeky 2.5 somersault with a 2.5 twist in the pipe position directly into an empty swimming pool, I'm going to have a bad time. Whereas if you fill the pool with water, the severity is significantly reduced. The same applies if someone falls from high onto an airbag or into a net rather than onto concrete. Someone hit by a car at 5 miles an hour isn't going to have as severe injuries as someone hit by a car at 70 miles an hour. Someone who eats water-based paint is going to have a less severe illness than someone who eats lead-based paint. I really don't know why people are eating paint in this situation, but you get my point. Lowering the severity on a risk assessment can be a great way of keeping people safe, so don't pigeonhole yourself by looking solely at measures that reduce the likelihood when you're doing your risk assessments. Myth number 4, generic risk assessments are the devil. Risk assessments have to be specific to the task you are completing. I'm certainly not disputing that because it's enshrined all over health and safety law. However, for companies working in some industries, particularly service sector organisations that are continually moving around and working on different client sites, generic risk assessments are a crucial part of health and safety management. It's simply not practical to start with a blank sheet of paper for every job, and in most cases the control measures and hazards are the same for every job. Take a cleaner who is involved in hoovering offices. The hazards and control measures are largely the same regardless of the offices that are being cleaned. The hoover will need to be pat tested, they will have to practice good cable management to avoid tripping, etc. So why would you go through the whole risk assessment process for every single office when the hazards and control measures are largely the same? In these cases, you should conduct a dynamic risk assessment at the point of work to identify and control site-specific hazards which supplement your generic risk assessments to make them specific to the site and task you are completing. This will save your business significant time in writing risk assessments whilst keeping you compliant, and you will actually have time to get the job done. Myth number 5. I don't have to have a risk assessment if I have less than 5 people. Yeah, you do. Every employer shall make a suitable and sufficient assessment of risk to health and safety of employees and persons not in his employ. Yes, that's right, every employer. Not people who just employ 5 people. This means regardless of the size of your organisation, you need to show that you've identified risks and controlled those risks. The myth comes from a different part of the management of health and safety at work regulations, which state that where an employer employs 5 or more employees, he shall record the assessment. Meaning, if you employ 5 or more people, you legally have to write down your assessment. The issue is that if you have less than 5 employees and your risk assessments are not written down, how do you prove that you've done a risk assessment to the HSE and to the courts? Furthermore, how do you prove that the findings of the assessment were communicated? This is a particular issue in the event of a civil claim. Let's be honest, if you were injured at work and your employer didn't have a record of a risk assessment, would you capitalise on that lack of evidence to win a claim? The best thing you can do as a business is just do a risk assessment. It doesn't take that long and you will then know that you're covered. And if you want to learn more about how to produce a suitable and sufficient risk assessment, we will be posting a series of videos on our channel detailing the steps you should take to make sure you hit the legal marks and put practical measures in place to stop your employees getting injured at work. So, if you want to catch them, make sure that you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Or you could just go to our website in the link below, get in touch, and we can come out and do your risk assessment. Do you agree with our risk assessment myth busting? If not, leave us a comment and argue your case. But for now, thanks for watching and stay safe out there.